sometimes the most dangerous mistake isn't arresting the wrong man. It's interrupting the wrong conversation. The voice on the encrypted military line remained calm, measured, and impossibly composed. "General, we're waiting for your authorization before moving to Phase 2. The sentence floated through a secure satellite connection stretching from the Pentagon to a quiet sidewalk just outside Arlington, Virginia, where no one passing by had the slightest idea that one of the highest-ranking officers in the United States Army was walking among them dressed in nothing more than faded blue jeans, a charcoal jacket, and worn brown boots. Major General Marcus Ellington preferred it that way. After more than 3 decades of service, countless deployments, and years spent making decisions that affected thousands of lives, he had learned that real authority rarely announced itself. It walked quietly. It listened more than it spoke. It never demanded attention because respect earned through character lasted far longer than recognition earned through appearances. Marcus adjusted the small wireless earpiece beneath his collar as he crossed toward a coffee shop 2 blocks from the Pentagon Annex. The autumn breeze carried golden leaves across the sidewalk while commuters hurried past without giving him a second glance. To everyone else, he looked like another middle-aged man finishing a long workday. The secure briefing had officially ended only minutes earlier, but several senior commanders had remained connected to finalize logistical details before the operation received final approval. "General Ellington," another voice asked through the encrypted channel. "Sir, we're standing by." Marcus glanced at his watch before answering quietly. "Give me 60 seconds. I'm stepping away from traffic." He never had the chance to finish. A sharp voice cut through the afternoon air with the confidence of someone who expected instant obedience. "Hey! You in the jacket? Stop right there." Marcus turned slowly, his expression calm, meeting the eyes of Officer Daniel Brooks as the patrol officer approached with quick, deliberate steps. Daniel's attention had locked onto the military terminology he had overheard only moments before. The words, the earpiece, and the calm confidence immediately sparked suspicion instead of curiosity. "Who are you talking to?" Daniel demanded. Marcus offered a polite nod. "I'm finishing an official call." The officer frowned, his gaze lingering on the ordinary clothes, then on Marcus's dark skin, before returning to the small earpiece. "Official? That's interesting. Because you don't look like military." Around them, pedestrians instinctively slowed. A woman carrying groceries paused near the curb. A ride-share driver lowered his window. Someone across the street quietly raised a phone, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. Marcus remained composed, neither offended nor intimidated. "Officer, I'd appreciate the opportunity to complete this conversation. It'll only take a moment." Daniel folded his arms. "Not until you tell me exactly who you are." Neither man noticed that the encrypted call had never disconnected. Hundreds of miles away, inside a secure operations center, every word spoken on that sidewalk continued echoing through speakers surrounded by decorated officers who suddenly realized their commanding general had stopped discussing military strategy and had begun answering questions from someone else entirely. Inside the secure operations center, conversations stopped one by one as unfamiliar voices replaced the carefully planned military briefing. The enormous digital map covering the front wall continued displaying live operational markers, but no one was looking at it anymore. Every eye shifted toward the communications console where the encrypted channel remained open. Lieutenant General Raymond Carter leaned forward slightly, his expression tightening without a trace of panic. Years of command had taught him that silence inside a secure call often carried more meaning than noise. The communications officer checked the monitor twice before speaking. "Sir, the connection is still active." General Ellington never disconnected. Raymond nodded once. "Keep recording. Do not interrupt unless his safety is immediately threatened." Across the room, intelligence analysts exchanged uncertain glances. Marcus Ellington was known throughout the Joint Chiefs for one habit above all others. He never left an official call unfinished. Every report was completed. Every confirmation was acknowledged. Every instruction received a clear response. The absence of his voice was becoming increasingly unusual. Back on the Arlington sidewalk, Marcus stood with the same composed posture that had carried him through decades of military leadership. His breathing remained steady as Officer Daniel Brooks continued examining him with growing skepticism. "You said this is official business," Daniel said. "Then you will not mind proving it." Marcus answered politely. "Officer, I understand you are doing your job. I only ask that you allow me to conclude a secure government conversation first." Daniel shook his head. "That is not how this works." A few pedestrians quietly gathered several yards away. Nobody shouted. Nobody interfered. They simply watched, sensing the tension created not by raised voices but by the complete contrast between the two men. One relied entirely on authority displayed through a badge. The other carried himself with a confidence that needed no introduction. An older veteran standing outside the nearby coffee shop narrowed his eyes as he studied Marcus from a distance. Something about the man's posture seemed strangely familiar. It was not the jacket or the jeans. It was the unmistakable discipline in the way he stood, shoulders relaxed, hands visible, eyes calm, never challenging, never fearful. The veteran whispered to himself, "That man has served." Daniel stepped closer. "Remove the earpiece." Marcus hesitated only briefly before replying. "I cannot do that while the secure line remains active." The answer only deepened Daniel's suspicion. He interpreted professionalism as defiance and restraint as concealment. Unknown to everyone standing on the sidewalk, the open microphone continued transmitting every word into one of the most secure military facilities in the country. The operations room had become remarkably quiet. Analysts stopped typing. Officers paused their discussions. Even the constant hum of equipment seemed louder against the growing silence. Then another voice spoke from the communications desk. "Sir, the location beacon has not moved for over 2 minutes." General Carter folded his hands behind his back. "Display his position." A blinking blue marker appeared on the digital map just outside the Pentagon perimeter. Several officers immediately recognized the location. None of them expected the next sentence that echoed through the speakers. "Officer, I respectfully advise that this conversation involves matters beyond public discussion." The room fell completely silent because everyone recognized the calm voice. General Marcus Ellington was still composed, still respectful, and somehow still trying to protect the dignity of the very encounter that was steadily becoming impossible for anyone inside that command center to ignore. Marcus Ellington lowered his eyes for only a brief moment, not in surrender but in patience. Experience had taught him that every difficult situation offered two paths. One was driven by pride. The other by discipline. Throughout his career, discipline had never failed him. He slowly removed his wallet with deliberate movements and held it where Officer Daniel Brooks could clearly see it. Inside were several ordinary cards, a driver's license, and nothing that immediately revealed the responsibilities resting on his shoulders every single day. Daniel examined the identification with narrowed eyes before looking back at Marcus. "Marcus Ellington," he read aloud. "Occupation is not listed." Marcus answered calmly. "That is correct." The response only seemed to reinforce Daniel's doubts. "Convenient," he replied. "You expect me to believe you are handling classified government business while walking around dressed like this?" Marcus remained respectful. Military service does not always look the way people expect. The words hung quietly in the cool afternoon air. Nearby, more people had stopped to watch. A delivery driver stood beside his van. 2 college students whispered while pretending to check directions on a phone. The older veteran outside the coffee shop continued observing without saying a word. He noticed the polished boots hidden beneath the casual jeans. He noticed the instinctive awareness Marcus showed whenever traffic approached. Most of all, he noticed the remarkable calm that never disappeared from the man's face. Years in uniform had taught him to recognize discipline long before rank. Inside the operations center, the atmosphere had shifted from curiosity to concern. A senior communications specialist adjusted the audio levels so every voice coming through the encrypted channel could be heard with perfect clarity. General Raymond Carter listened carefully, saying nothing as another unfamiliar civilian voice filtered through the speakers. "Sir, should we terminate the operation briefing?" one colonel quietly asked. Raymond answered without taking his eyes off the location display. "No. We wait for General Ellington unless circumstances require immediate action." A younger intelligence officer studied the blinking position marker. "He has not moved more than a few feet in nearly 5 minutes." That observation caught everyone's attention. Marcus was known for walking during secure conversations whenever possible. Standing still for that long was completely unlike him. Back on the sidewalk, Daniel crossed his arms. "If this is really official business, tell me who is on the other end of that call." Marcus offered the same composed expression he had maintained since the encounter began. "I cannot discuss secure communications in a public place." Daniel sighed with visible frustration. "That sounds like another excuse." He glanced toward the growing crowd before speaking more loudly. "People pretend to be military all the time. It happens more than you think." Marcus did not react to the accusation. Instead, he simply replied, "Officer, appearances can be misleading. That is why facts matter." Those words reached the secure operations center exactly as they were spoken. No anger. No resentment. Only quiet conviction. General Carter finally turned toward the communications team. "Prepare a response vehicle." No alarm sounded. No dramatic orders echoed across the room. Every movement remained measured and professional. The officers understood that something unexpected was unfolding only a short distance away. They also understood one important fact that nobody standing on that Ellington sidewalk could possibly know. The calm man wearing ordinary clothes was not asking for special treatment. He was simply trying to finish a conversation that carried responsibilities reaching far beyond anything visible to the watching crowd. Officer Daniel Brooks looked around at the growing circle of silent faces and felt an unexpected pressure settling over the sidewalk. More people had stopped walking. Several held their phones at chest level, recording quietly without saying a word. The attention strengthened his confidence rather than weakening it. In his mind, backing away now would suggest uncertainty, and uncertainty was something he refused to display while wearing a badge. Marcus Ellington noticed the shifting mood immediately. He had spent decades reading rooms before they became crises, recognizing the subtle changes that appeared long before anyone else acknowledged them. He understood that the situation had moved beyond a simple conversation. Every decision from this moment forward would shape how dozens of strangers remembered what happened on this quiet afternoon. "Officer," Marcus said with the same calm voice, "I have answered every question respectfully. I am asking once more to finish this secure conversation before we continue." Daniel shook his head. "That call is exactly what concerns me." Marcus gave a slight nod, accepting that no explanation would change the officer's mind. "Then I hope you will at least understand why I cannot discuss its contents." Daniel interpreted the response as further refusal. He asked Marcus to remain where he was while he stepped a few feet away to speak into his shoulder radio. The exchange was brief, but long enough for Marcus's open military connection to continue transmitting every word and every pause. Inside the secure operations center, the atmosphere became increasingly focused. Analysts enlarged the digital map while another communications specialist isolated background sounds from the live audio feed. Traffic could be heard. Passing footsteps. A distant siren. Then the unmistakable crackle of a civilian. Police radio. General Raymond Carter slowly lifted his eyes from the display. "Confirm that audio." The technician answered immediately. "Confirmed, sir. Local law enforcement radio traffic is within a few feet of General Ellington." Nobody spoke for several seconds. Every experienced officer in the room understood exactly what that meant. The secure conversation had unexpectedly become a witness to an unfolding public encounter. Back outside, the older veteran finally stepped forward from the coffee shop entrance. He did not interfere. He simply addressed Daniel with measured respect. "Officer, I served for 28 years. There is something about this gentleman that deserves another look. Daniel acknowledged the comment with a brief glance before answering, "I appreciate your service, sir, but I will handle this." The veteran nodded politely and stepped back, disappointment visible but restrained. Marcus offered the veteran a grateful smile before returning his attention to Daniel. He still refused to raise his voice. He still refused to argue. His patience remained remarkably steady despite the curious eyes surrounding him. Hundreds of miles of encrypted communications infrastructure continued carrying every second of silence directly into the command center. Then another calm voice emerged through Marcus's earpiece, clear enough for the military listeners but too faint for anyone nearby to understand. "General Ellington, this is command. If you are unable to respond, acknowledge by remaining connected." Marcus said nothing. He did not need to. The connection itself had become his answer. General Carter immediately turned toward the duty officer. "Dispatch the response team now." Chairs moved quietly across polished floors as uniformed personnel began walking with deliberate purpose. No one rushed. No one panicked. Yet every person in that room understood the same reality. The clock had started moving in two different places at once. One countdown was happening inside the operations center. The other was unfolding on an ordinary Arlington sidewalk where almost everyone still believed they were watching a routine police encounter, completely unaware that the conversation continuing through a single wireless earpiece had already set something far larger into motion. Inside the secure operations center, the atmosphere remained disciplined, but the quiet confidence that usually filled the room had been replaced by careful urgency. A large digital display projected General Marcus Ellington's encrypted signal in real time. The green connection icon had remained steady from the moment he left the Pentagon Annex, yet the conversation itself had changed completely. Instead of discussing deployment schedules and operational readiness, the microphones now carried unfamiliar voices, passing traffic, and long stretches of silence that spoke louder than words. Colonel Sarah Whitmore studied the incoming data while comparing it against Marcus's planned schedule for the afternoon. Everything matched perfectly until the exact minute he had reached the intersection outside the coffee shop. That was where the unexpected delay began. "Signal strength is stable," she reported. "Battery level is normal. The secure channel has never disconnected." General Raymond Carter folded his arms and continued watching the location marker blinking on the map. "Meaning he has intentionally kept the connection alive." Sarah nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. General Ellington understands secure communications better than anyone in this room. If he wanted privacy, he would have ended the call immediately. Instead, he left every microphone active." That observation settled heavily across the operations floor. Marcus was known for thinking several moves ahead of everyone else. Nothing about his decisions was accidental. If the connection remained open, there had to be a reason. Back outside, the afternoon sun drifted lower across Arlington as long shadows stretched over the sidewalk. Marcus stood exactly where Officer Daniel Brooks had instructed him to remain. His expression showed neither frustration nor fear. Years of military leadership had taught him that composure often influenced outcomes more effectively than confrontation. The growing crowd sensed that calm as well. Conversations remained hushed. Even those recording with their phones had lowered their voices, almost instinctively respecting the quiet dignity Marcus continued to display. Daniel returned after another brief exchange over his police radio. "I have requested additional verification," he said. "Until then, nobody is going anywhere." Marcus simply answered, "I understand." The older veteran watching nearby could no longer ignore the familiar details. The posture. The measured breathing. The disciplined eye contact. None of those qualities appeared by chance. They were built over decades of service. He quietly stepped toward a young man standing beside him and whispered, "You are looking at someone who has carried responsibility most people will never understand." The younger man glanced back at Marcus with a different perspective than before. Across the country, encrypted speakers carried every word from the sidewalk into the operations center. A communications technician suddenly looked up from his console. "Sir, we have another indicator." General Carter turned immediately. "Report." "The emergency continuity protocol has activated automatically because the commanding officer has remained connected beyond the operational checkpoint without completing authentication." Several officers exchanged brief glances. That protocol almost never activated. It existed only for extraordinary situations when senior leadership could not complete scheduled confirmations. Carter nodded once. "Proceed to Phase 1 response." Within seconds, staff members began moving with calm precision. A military liaison contacted regional command. A transportation officer confirmed departure routes. No alarm sounded because professionals did not need alarms to recognize responsibility. Outside, nothing appeared different to the people gathered on the sidewalk. Cars continued passing. Leaves drifted across the pavement. Coffee cups steamed beneath the cool autumn breeze. Yet beneath that ordinary afternoon, two completely different worlds had quietly intersected. One believed it was handling a routine public encounter. The other had already begun mobilizing because a single uninterrupted military call had become the silent witness to everything unfolding in real time. The response convoy departed without flashing lights or dramatic announcements. 3 dark government sport utility vehicles merged quietly into late afternoon traffic, moving with the precision expected of people who understood that professionalism often spoke louder than urgency. Every passenger inside had received only the essential facts. General Marcus Ellington remained connected to an encrypted command call beyond the scheduled authentication window. His location had not changed. Local law enforcement radio traffic had been detected on the same audio channel. Nothing else was assumed because assumptions had no place in disciplined decision-making. Colonel Sarah Whitmore sat in the lead vehicle reviewing the live communication feed through a secure headset. She listened carefully as ordinary street sounds drifted across the channel. Passing engines. Rustling leaves. Quiet conversations from bystanders. Then came Marcus's familiar voice, steady as ever. "Officer, I assure you I have no intention of leaving." Sarah closed her eyes for a brief second. Anyone unfamiliar with Marcus would hear only calm words. Those who had worked beside him for years recognized something more significant. He was choosing every sentence carefully, preserving respect even while circumstances became increasingly unusual. On the Arlington sidewalk, Officer Daniel Brooks noticed additional people slowing their pace. The crowd had grown naturally, not because anyone encouraged it, but because calm uncertainty attracted attention. Several individuals quietly exchanged opinions. Some believed Marcus had done nothing wrong. Others assumed the officer must have had a valid reason for continuing the encounter. The uncertainty itself became part of the atmosphere. Marcus remained exactly where he stood, his posture unchanged. He glanced briefly toward the horizon where the afternoon sunlight reflected across office windows before returning his attention to Daniel. "Officer," he said gently, "every minute this conversation remains unfinished creates unnecessary complications for people who are waiting." Daniel interpreted the statement differently than it was intended. "Then maybe you should have thought about that before refusing to answer my questions." Marcus simply nodded. "I have answered every question truthfully." The words carried no frustration. Only quiet certainty. Across the secure channel, those listening inside the operations center understood the deeper meaning immediately. General Raymond Carter turned toward the transportation coordinator. "Estimated arrival." 7 minutes, sir." Carter looked once more at the blinking location marker. "Maintain communication monitoring. No interruptions unless General Ellington requests assistance." The room returned to disciplined silence. Nobody questioned the order because everyone trusted Marcus's judgment. If he believed the situation could still be handled with patience, they would honor that judgment until circumstances changed. Back outside, the older veteran slowly approached the edge of the gathering crowd once again. This time he did not speak to the officer. Instead, he quietly addressed the people standing beside him. "Watch how that gentleman carries himself," he said softly. "Real leadership is easiest to recognize when someone has every reason to lose patience but refuses to do it." Several people shifted their attention back to Marcus. They noticed details they had overlooked before. The measured breathing. The steady eye contact. The complete absence of anger. It was as though he understood that every person watching would remember not only what happened, but also how each person involved chose to respond. Far down the avenue, 3 dark vehicles continued closing the distance, unnoticed among the steady flow of Washington area traffic. Inside them sat men and women who already knew exactly who Marcus Ellington was. The only question remaining was whether they would arrive before assumptions hardened into conclusions that no one standing on that quiet sidewalk could easily forget. The first vehicle rolled quietly to the curb without sirens, flashing lights, or unnecessary spectacle. It was simply another dark government sport utility vehicle to everyone watching from the sidewalk. A second followed only seconds later. Then a third. Their arrival was so calm that many bystanders barely noticed at first. Officer Daniel Brooks glanced toward the convoy, expecting perhaps another agency responding to assist. Instead, every vehicle came to a precise stop as if following a carefully rehearsed sequence. The doors opened almost simultaneously. Men and women in military service uniforms stepped onto the sidewalk with measured confidence, their expressions professional and composed. Nobody hurried. Nobody raised a voice. Colonel Sarah Whitmore exited the lead vehicle first, followed by 2 senior officers carrying secure communication cases. She surveyed the scene for only a moment before her eyes settled on Marcus Ellington. The concern visible on her face disappeared immediately, replaced by unmistakable respect. Without hesitation, she walked directly toward him. The crowd instinctively moved aside, creating a clear path without anyone asking them to do so. Conversations faded into complete silence. Even the traffic seemed distant. Marcus remained standing exactly where he had been all afternoon, his posture unchanged despite everything that had happened. Sarah stopped several feet in front of him and rendered a crisp military salute. "Good afternoon, General Ellington," she said clearly. "Command requested confirmation of your status after your secure call remained active." Every sound on the sidewalk seemed to disappear at once. Officer Daniel Brooks stared at Marcus, then at the uniformed officers surrounding him. The title echoed in his mind with unexpected weight. General. Not captain. Not major. General. Behind Sarah, the other officers followed with the same disciplined respect, each acknowledging Marcus according to military protocol. No dramatic announcement had been made. No identification card had been displayed. No one needed to explain who Marcus was because the conduct of every arriving officer explained it more clearly than words ever could. The older veteran standing near the coffee shop quietly lowered his head for a brief moment. A faint smile crossed his face, not because someone had been proven wrong, but because quiet dignity had finally been recognized. Several people recording with their phones slowly lowered them, realizing they were witnessing something far more meaningful than an ordinary public encounter. Sarah spoke again, this time with quiet concern. "Sir," the Joint Chiefs remained on the line throughout the interruption. "General Carter instructed us to ensure you could safely resume the briefing." Marcus offered a small, reassuring smile. "Thank you, Colonel." Everyone remained remarkably patient. His answer contained no criticism. No anger. No attempt to embarrass anyone standing nearby. Officer Daniel Brooks looked from Marcus to the officers surrounding him, searching for some sign that this had all been a misunderstanding he could quickly explain away. Instead, he found only calm professionalism. One communications officer stepped forward and respectfully handed Marcus a secure headset replacement. "Sir, your connection is ready whenever you are." Marcus accepted it with a grateful nod before turning toward Daniel. There was no triumph in his expression. No satisfaction at being recognized. Only the same calm presence he had shown since the very beginning. Around them, the afternoon breeze carried another wave of autumn leaves across the sidewalk as an ordinary street corner quietly transformed into a lesson that nobody standing there would soon forget. Without changing his voice or his posture, Marcus had revealed something far more powerful than rank alone. True authority had arrived without demanding attention because real leadership never needed to announce itself before others recognized it. Officer Daniel Brooks felt the weight of dozens of silent eyes without anyone saying a single word. Only minutes earlier he believed he understood exactly what he was seeing. Now every assumption he had made seemed to dissolve beneath the quiet professionalism surrounding General Marcus Ellington. No one had argued with him. No one had humiliated him. The truth had simply arrived, and it spoke for itself. Colonel Sarah Whitmore accepted a secure tablet from one of the communications officers and reviewed the status report that had continued updating throughout the entire encounter. She looked toward Marcus. "Sir, the operation briefing is still waiting for your authorization. General Carter asked me to inform you that the timeline can be adjusted if necessary." Marcus offered a grateful nod. Please thank him for the patience shown by everyone involved. Sarah hesitated before speaking again. "There is one additional matter, sir. Because the secure communication remained active during the entire encounter, the complete audio has already been preserved under federal continuity procedures." Her words were calm and factual. They were not presented as a warning or a threat. They were simply part of the official record. Daniel lowered his eyes for a brief moment as the meaning settled in. Every question, every interruption, every assumption had been documented exactly as it happened. There would be no debate about what was said because the conversation itself had become its own witness. The older veteran slowly walked closer, stopping a respectful distance away. Looking first at Marcus and then at Daniel, he spoke quietly enough that only those nearest could hear. "The uniform teaches discipline. Character teaches wisdom. They are not always the same lesson." Nobody responded immediately. The silence carried more weight than any argument could have. Marcus turned toward Daniel with the same composed expression he had maintained from the beginning. "Officer Brooks," he said gently, "every profession carries tremendous responsibility. Yours protects communities. Mine protects the nation. Neither duty can be fulfilled well if we begin with assumptions instead of understanding." Daniel finally met Marcus's eyes. The confidence that had filled his voice earlier had disappeared, replaced by thoughtful reflection. "General," he said quietly, "I should have listened before reaching conclusions." Marcus gave a slight nod. Listening is often the hardest part of leadership because it requires patience before judgment. Around them, several bystanders slowly stopped recording. They realized they were no longer watching an ordinary public encounter. They were witnessing a conversation about responsibility, respect, and the consequences of perception. The younger man who had been standing beside the veteran looked toward Marcus with genuine admiration. "I never would have guessed who he was," he whispered. The veteran answered softly, "That is exactly the point. You should never have to." Colonel Whitmore received another secure message and looked back toward Marcus. "Sir, transportation is ready whenever you are." Marcus glanced once across the gathering before placing the replacement headset over one ear. His voice remained steady as he resumed the conversation that had unexpectedly connected two very different worlds. "General Carter, thank you for waiting. I am prepared to continue." A familiar voice answered through the secure channel. "Welcome back, General. We never doubted you would handle the situation with honor." As Marcus stepped toward the waiting vehicle, the afternoon returned to its ordinary rhythm. Cars continued down the avenue. People resumed their walks. The autumn wind carried another swirl of golden leaves across the sidewalk. Yet everyone who had stood there understood that they would remember this day not because a distinguished officer had been recognized, but because true leadership had answered misunderstanding with patience, dignity, and quiet respect instead of anger. The following morning, Arlington looked exactly as it had the day before. Commuters filled the sidewalks. Coffee shops welcomed the early rush. Traffic flowed steadily beneath a bright autumn sky. To most people, nothing had changed. Yet inside conference rooms, briefing halls, and police training classrooms, conversations had already begun. The preserved audio from the uninterrupted secure communication was reviewed according to established procedures, not to embarrass anyone, but to understand how quickly assumptions could replace careful observation. Every word was examined in context. Every response was measured against professional standards. The purpose was not punishment. It was improvement. General Marcus Ellington never requested special recognition. He never asked that the recordings be released publicly. He never demanded an apology beyond the honest conversation that had already taken place on the sidewalk. When General Raymond Carter spoke with him later that evening, he asked a simple question. "Marcus, is there anything further you would like command to do?" Marcus answered with the same quiet conviction that had guided him throughout his career. "Yes, sir." Make certain the lesson is remembered for the right reason. This was never about proving who I was. It was about remembering that every person deserves to be treated with dignity before anyone knows their title. Those words circulated through military leadership because they reflected something deeper than rank. They reflected character. Several days later, Officer Daniel Brooks attended a professional review meeting. He accepted responsibility for the decisions he had made and acknowledged that assumptions had influenced his judgment before facts had been fully established. It was not an easy conversation, but meaningful growth rarely begins with comfort. The older veteran who had witnessed the entire encounter was later interviewed by a local reporter. When asked what stood out most from that afternoon, he smiled thoughtfully before answering. It was not the arrival of the military vehicles. It was not the salute. It was not even discovering who the gentleman really was. What stayed with me was that he never stopped treating everyone around him with respect, even when respect had not yet been offered to him. Those words spread quietly through the community because they captured what so many people had felt but struggled to express. The young man who had stood beside the veteran that afternoon would later tell his family that the experience changed the way he looked at strangers. "I realized," he said, "that I know almost nothing about the people I pass every day. Every person is carrying a story I cannot see." Meanwhile, General Marcus Ellington returned to the responsibilities that had briefly been interrupted. The operation he authorized proceeded successfully. Meetings continued. Decisions were made. New challenges appeared, just as they always did. Yet the quiet afternoon in Arlington remained with him, not because it questioned his authority, but because it reminded him why humility was one of the greatest responsibilities any leader could carry. Rank can open doors. Titles can command attention. Uniforms can inspire respect. But none of those things reveal the true measure of a person. Character does. That ordinary jacket never changed who Marcus Ellington was. The absence of medals never erased decades of honorable service. The silence with which he carried himself became stronger than any introduction. Because in the end, real leadership does not need to announce itself before it deserves respect. It simply lives its values until the truth becomes impossible to overlook. Some people wear authority on their shoulders. Others carry it in their actions. And history almost always remembers the second kind far longer than the first.